Uh-huh. Click the link and dive right in. AI bites in every spin.
Okay, so this excerpt from the Lightworker Trials, right? Secret societies. Ancient powers hidden in the world. Sign me up. And Australia, come on, the setting alone has me hooked. Did you get those vibes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, talk about a place ripe for mystical intrigue, right? Australia, you've
Yeah.
got ancient cultures, those epic landscapes. It's the perfect backdrop.
Totally. And then you drop this protagonist, Eyre, into the mix. It's like, boom, lost her parents, discover she's got these wild powers.
Whoa, talk about a lot for a young woman to handle. That grief, the responsibility, and then throw in the whole chosen one trope.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of powers and chosen ones, the excerpt mentions the Blue Mountains as Eyre's training ground. Is there any real-world significance to that location? Because like you were saying, Australia's got that ancient vibe going on.
Big time. For Australia Aboriginal cultures, the Blue Mountains are deeply spiritual. We're talking Dreamtime stories, sacred sites for the Gundungurra and Darug people. Even the landscape itself, those dramatic cliffs, the eucalyptus forest, it all just screams mystical energy. Perfect spot to train a lightworker, right?
Totally. It's like the author just plucked it from reality and dropped it right into this fantasy world. And it just adds this extra layer, you know? Like, wait, is that a real place? I need to Google this.
Right. And that's what I love about fantasy, how it can weave in real-world mythology and history. And speaking of weaving, that whole chosen one thing with Eyre, it's the tale as old as time, isn't it? But I think this story's got a good twist.
Yeah, because, I mean, we see Eyre drowning in grief in the excerpt. She's got this huge responsibility thrust upon her, and she's still processing this massive loss. So is she going to embrace this destiny, or would she push back against it?
Exactly. And that's where it gets so interesting. It's not just a clear-cut, okay, you're the chosen one, time to save the world. It's like, how does her grief, her trauma, play into this? Will it fuel her powers or hold her back? I'm getting some serious Katniss Everdeen vibes, you know?
Oh, totally. That internal conflict, that struggle for agency, I think that's what makes these Chosen One stories so compelling, even when they're set in these fantastical worlds. It's relatable.
Absolutely, because we've all felt that pressure, haven't we? To live up to expectations, to rise to the occasion, even if it's not, you know, saving the world from evil forces or anything.
Right. Speaking of evil forces, the excerpt mentions Lightworkers, which I love that term, by the way, battling against some pretty malevolent forces. So are there any real-world parallels to this idea, like groups or belief systems centered around protecting the Earth?
Oh, tons. Throughout history, you've got cultures that believe in guardians of sacred knowledge or protectors of nature. Think about ancient druids, indigenous shamans. They all held these vital roles. And today you see it in groups like the Indigenous Environmental Network, fighting to protect sacred lands, or the Earth Guardians, a movement of young activists addressing climate change. So that whole idea of humans being stewards of the Earth, it's a universal thing.
It is. It really makes you wonder, what would it take for someone to step into that role today? Like, what would I do if I suddenly discovered I could, I don't know, talk to trees or control the weather?
Yeah.
Would I use my powers for good? Would I even know how to? It's a lot of responsibility.
It is. I mean, that's the question, isn't it? Just because you have the power, does it make you the hero? It's like that old saying, with great power comes
Great responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay, but before I get lost in an existential crisis about my own hidden potential for heroism, we have to talk about the magic system. The excerpt, unfortunately, keeps that part a bit vague.
A classic author tease.
Right. But it did get me thinking, what makes certain magic systems in fantasy so captivating? Why are some more compelling than others?
For me, it always boils down to the rules and limitations. Like, the best magic systems have a cost, a consequence. It can't just be a get-out-of-jail-free card, you know? I always think back to, and I know it's a classic example, but Sanderson's Mistborn series. Magic in that world is all about these metals. You consume them, you metabolize them, and each one grants you different powers, but there are also drawbacks.
Right, so it's not just like, oh, I have magic, I can do anything. There are actual consequences, which makes it more believable, too, even if it is magic.
Exactly. Those limitations, they create tension, they raise the stakes, and they force the author to be more creative, too, right? They can't just magic their way out of every situation.
Totally. So I'm really hoping we get to see some of those limitations, those costs with Eyre's powers, because in the excerpt, she seems to be struggling to control them, which honestly makes it more exciting.
Oh, 100%. Limitations equal higher stakes. Always.
But, you know, speaking of stakes, we should touch on the target audience for this book, because it's categorized as young adult, right?
Yeah.
We should. And I have to say, I think YA fantasy is so important. It's that time in your life when you're figuring everything out, your identity, your values, what you want to do with your life. So to have these stories where young people are the heroes, where they're battling these incredible forces.
It's incredibly powerful. Seeing characters their age overcome challenges, tap into their potential, it can be so inspiring for a young reader. And let's be real, there's also the pure escapism of it all. Diving into these worlds of magic and adventure, facing down monsters and uncovering ancient secrets. That's the beauty of a good YA fantasy, right? It lets you escape into another world for a bit.
100%. This whole deep dive has me wanting to do just that escape into the Lightworker Trials. It's going straight to the top of my reading list. And now I can't stop thinking about what I'd do if I had hidden powers. It's a lot to ponder.
Right. Time to go meditate on that one. Harness our inner Lightworker.
Exactly. Maybe I'll find my own personal Blue Mountains to train in. Thanks for diving into the Lightworker Trials with me today. Until next time, keep those imaginations sparking and those books turning.
Click the link and dive right in. AI bites in every spin.